I can still remember as a new young reporter emailing Rachel Held Evans. And then when I got the response back from her as a new guy in all of this, I was incredibly surprised that she even responded back. And so when I heard about the untimely death of her life, I gotta tell you, there was a sense of sorrow and sadness. And I remember thinking, wow, what a life. So to be here today on her back porch that she designed with her father is an extraordinary day for me in time. So I'm here with Peter Held. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Yeah, it's good to have you here in Dayton. Welcome.
It's good to be here. I gotta tell you, the full disclosure, I admired your daughter. There's no doubt about that. And it's one of those things that when you and I start talking about our time here today, I remember thinking, what an incredible opportunity it is. And then when I came here to the home that she designed and the backdrop here, Peter, I got to tell you, I wish everyone who's watching this would be here,
Yeah.
to be fair with you, just because it's such an incredible view. Can we go down memory lane a little bit? As her father, as I have a daughter as well, so we know how that works for us as
Yeah.
dads. What was it like being Rachel's dad?
Well, for most of that, it was like being any girl's dad. I mean, it
Mm.
was, she was a real typical kid, had
Oh,
lots of friends. She, uh, she enjoyed her time with her friends. So it was mostly going through those things
that,
that children go through. We did know early on that she was going to be a writer.
hmm,
It was just in her. It was just a gift that she had even as a child,
wow.
and she just loved words. When she was a child, she had some case of fairly severe eczema,
Hmm.
and so she had a hard time going to sleep at night, itching and scratching, and but we still had a bedtime. She still had to go to bed at a certain time, and we told her this: you can read if that will help get your mind off of things. And so she would read for hours and hours and hours. In fact, the first gift we remember that she asked for was a thesaurus.
Huh.
Not a Barbie doll, but a thesaurus. And
Did you know then, by the way, there's something unique here going on here?
well, not we had no idea where it was going to lead, but we had an idea that this notion of her reading at night wasn't real typical of
Yeah.
children, and that her desire for words, we knew that that was going to be
Hmm.
something important. And as years went by, we found out that the way I think of it is, if you're a writer, you're going to write.
Yeah.
In fact, when she wrote her first book, she told me, I have to write this book, whether it ever gets published or not. I just have to write it. And it hit me that I guess that's what writers do. They have
Hmm.
to write, whether anybody ever reads the stuff or not. And I think that's kind of an insight into her, that
Yeah.
she just had this gift that she was going to express it, and whether anybody ever read it or not, she was still going to do it.
How did she, even being here in her house, to be fair with you, Peter, you can tell there's a lot of purpose to certain things, and we're here on the back deck, obviously. How did you know that her life was going to be a life of purpose, where she had to write
Hmm.
the book, where she had to speak, where she had to speak out? Everything that she's did, it seems like, was full of purpose, Peter.
Yeah.
So how did she do that so well?
Well, you probably know, as a father, it's really difficult to be objective when you're evaluating your children's abilities.
Yeah,
I mean, you think they're the
very
best
hard,
at
very
everything,
hard. Yeah.
You're always wanting to be affirming, and you always want to support whatever they're doing. So you try to give them this notion that you can do it. You can do well. That's what every father does. So I don't know that I had a real good grasp of
Mm.
how good she was. I remember when she did write her first manuscript, and she didn't know how to get into publishing. Or I made an appointment with her and with me and another friend that had just published a book. And I said, would you just give her some hints on how to get into the business? He said, well, tell her to bring her manuscript. I remember we sat down in my office. This was the first book that she wrote. and he started reading it, and I'm wondering how's he going to
Like, what's
evaluate
going
this?
on here?
Is he
Yeah.
going to say nice? But anyway, he reads it, and I could tell he's getting into it, and he looks up and he goes, "This is good," and he reads a few pages, and he says, "This is really good." He reads one more page, and he puts it down. He says, "This needs to be published." And he said, "I'm going to show this to my publisher. I'm going to show it to people that I know." And he said, "This needs to be published." And anyway, he passed it on to some people who passed it on to somebody else. And so
And
that's
it all
kind of,
gets started.
yeah, that's how it all got started. It finally fell into the hands of a person that knew how to get it published. And
Once it gets started, Peter, what did you think just as a dad stepping back and looking at it? Because, man, I can remember reading her first book and going, wow, this is good.
mhm.
And then watching her, I would say, her ministry career from afar and going, this is pretty good. What was it like being on that ride for you as a dad?
Well, I was always a little hesitant, didn't know how far things were going to go. And it's not that Rachel felt like she ever wanted to become famous,
Yeah.
or she was just going to write. And yeah, so I didn't know if this was just going to be a one-hit wonder. We know people that have
Yeah.
published a book, and
It's been good.
it's been
Yeah.
good, and that's been the end of it. And then she got an idea for another book, and actually ended up changing publishers a couple times. And it, it, I guess it didn't hit me until she started getting speaking engagements at places that I was impressed with. She wasn't all that impressed.
Yeah.
I remember when she got invited to speak at the conference for religion and philosophy at Notre Dame,
Mm.
and I thought, "Whoa, this is big time."
Pretty. It's a big deal. Yeah.
And so as things kind of gradually, as she started getting invitations to places, she would hardly mention them to me, and I'd say, "Rachel, you going anywhere this weekend?" And she would name some place that she's going. I said, "Rachel, that's a big deal." And she, "Oh, Dad, that's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal."
Hmm.
So it was a real gradual thing. I don't know that it was ever just, wow, this is. And I guess when she got appointed to the President's Commission, Advisory Commission on faith-based initiatives, and Obama appointed her to that. That was a pretty big milestone too, and she still insisted that wasn't a big deal either.
Wow. Even that.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's one of those things, and getting ready for our time together, we've shared a little bit, and we both unfortunately have I would say, the unfortunate part of being the same team when it comes to losing a child.
yeah,
And so I asked this next question, just with all due respect,
sure.
Peter. When you found out that she was sick and that unfortunately it was not going to turn out the way that you and I thought it would in this
Right.
life, what were the feelings, the emotions? What were you thinking?
Yeah, well, at first we just thought it was a flu or something, and so Dan took her to the local hospital, and then she had a seizure while she was in the hospital locally, and that's when it hit us. This is getting serious. So they transferred her to a hospital in Chattanooga, and I remember when the doctor said that the way they treat this would be to induce a coma, and so that the brain would stop seizing, and then gradually wean her off as the seizures reduced.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't subside. They didn't reduce, and I could tell the doctor was very capable. Couldn't give an explanation as to why. Number one, they didn't know why she was having seizures. Number two, they couldn't stop them. And I remember driving home one night from the hospital, and I literally cried out
Yeah.
loud driving the car.
Hmm.
And I remember shouting and crying,
Hmm.
"I am not going to let Satan steal my faith. I am not going to let Satan
Hmm.
steal my faith." that's when it hit me we could lose her. Now there was always hope,
Yeah.
but that's when it hit me. This could be serious. If she did come out of it, who knows what
What would
her,
happen?
yeah, what,
Yeah.
how well she could function at all. And that was a dark ride home.
I can't even imagine. I've
Yeah.
been there. When you talk about, I'm not going to let Satan steal my faith. Can you go into that just a little bit?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. By profession, I'm a theologian. I
Yeah.
teach at a college. One of the courses that I teach is about angels, Satan, and demons. And so I've done a little bit of study over the years on what Satan does. And what comes into my mind is the parable of the sower who sows the seed, and some of it grows, some of it doesn't grow
Yeah.
because of different reasons. One of them is that the birds come along and take the seed away. And when the disciples asked Jesus, "What's the meaning of this parable?" He talked about part of it was that that part of Satan that can come and just take that faith away. And I knew that was a battle I was going to have to go into. And I don't believe in addressing Satan or talking to
Yeah.
Satan. But I made that statement that I'm not going to let that happen because I knew that this was going to be a test of faith.
Wow.
So that's kind of what was going through my mind when I made that statement driving home.
When the doctor comes to you and says, "Hey, this is not gonna end like you think it," and like people were praying, I was one of those people.
Yeah,
Can you just kind of take us into that moment a little bit,
sure.
Peter, a little bit for us?
Sure. Well, we were in Chattanooga, like I said, and I remember the doctor was so skilled and just so
Yeah.
knowledgeable, but I could tell he just wasn't finding what he was hoping for. And I remember putting my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Doc, don't give up on my girl.
Wow.
Don't give up on her." And I forget how much time from that moment to when he had her transferred to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville by helicopter. And I remember a sense of relief. Well, if anybody can help her, they can. But they ran into the same thing, is they just could not figure out why she wasn't coming out of all of this as they hoped. And the moment you're talking about
Yeah.
was when Dan, Rachel's husband, requested, "Is there a way we could talk to all the doctors here?" Because you talk to them one at a time.
And they're all coming in and
and
going.
there's
Yeah.
dozens of them. And one of the things that was so helpful during this process, a former student of mine that I had actually officiated her wedding was on the faculty of Vanderbilt Medical School. She came in and sat with us for every day that we were at Vanderbilt Hospital. And we mentioned to her, it would be so helpful if we could talk to all these doctors. And she said, we can
We can
make
do that.
that
Yeah.
happen. So we sat in a conference room with, I counted them, 13 medical people, and asked all of our questions. And that's when it was fully communicated, this is not gonna go well. And that the question was, we just need to take her off a ventilator. We need to take her off of life support. That's when it hit. That's when it hit.
I cannot even imagine. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You realize through all of this, we've spoken about this, her influence. Man, what has that done for you as a dad to hear all the stories, people like me and others
Yeah.
who said, man, how she's influenced their lives?
Well, that's been encouraging, obviously,
Yeah.
that she's had such an influence. We've received letters literally from all over the world and cards, and that's been encouraging. It's, it also adds to the question of it all.
Yeah.
That, as you mentioned, you were praying. I mean, thousands and thousands of people all over the world were praying for her, and that's encouraging. But then makes you wonder, how much prayer does God need
To move
to
stuff.
move
Yeah.
something, to
Yeah.
do something? And so you start asking questions like that.
Mm.
And in the days since, it continues to be. We still get letters, we still get phone
Mm.
calls, we still get cards, and that's still encouraging. But I've wondered about people who don't have that influence. What
Mhm.
what happens to their memory? And it makes you realize how important that phrase is when somebody passes away and someone says, "We will not forget. We won't forget your loved one." That is so meaningful,
Yeah.
because so many people do get forgotten, and
Mm.
it makes you wonder about, well, what about those people? But yeah, it it's encouraging. Uh, uh, you know, it's a double-edged sword because you want to hear that encouragement. You really want to hear,
Yeah.
but at the other times, there are those moments when you don't want to have to live through it again. But it's both. It's encouraging to talk to you and tell the story, but then it's still painful. So, but I think the pain's never going to go away, and
Yeah.
that's okay, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
It is
pain
okay.
pain is. I think Philip Yancey said, "Pain is God's mega." Or maybe it was C.S. Lewis. Pain is God's megaphone to tell us something's not right,
It
and
is.
and that's not the way things are supposed to be. To have death and dying, and so yeah, we learned to live with the
It's a
pain.
good way of putting it, by the
Yeah,
way. I think it, we will always have pain after the fall.
yeah, that's right.
Always. Um, the kids,
Yeah,
the number one question that people wanted me to ask you when I
is
was
that
when I was
right?
going to come here is, how are the two kids doing?
Well, again, that's a double-edged sword as well. They're doing well considering,
Yeah.
but it's hard to grow up without a mom, and in the time we spend with them, they're so young. I don't think they realize what all
Mm.
happened. Dan, Rachel's husband, has been so good. He
Mm.
is, oh gosh, he's loved on those kids. He's made them his priority, and he's doing a super job. But it's hard, and it's hard,
Mm.
even with this pandemic going on. It's hard for us to spend a lot of FaceTime with them because they warn us, against the contagion and all of that. So yeah, the nanny, the sitter that they had, actually got uh,
Oh,
COVID
wow.
and spent a lot of time in the hospital, and so now it's trying to work out finding some more
Yeah.
help somewhere else, and so it's been really really hard. I don't want to minimize that at all, but Dan's doing a super job, and the kids are great. They're
Mm.
just beautiful kids.
Yeah. And Dan's doing, how's he holding up? Same. I can't
Yeah,
imagine being a single dad
yeah,
in all of this.
yeah, and just all that follows to that. Uh, he struggled with whether to even finish the house or whether
Oh,
to finish it and sell it, or uh, but he's taking it day by day and making good choices, um, but it's hard. It's
yeah.
hard.
What would Rachel say about all of this? Just the memories, the people, the tribute. What would she say about all this about her own
Yeah.
life, Peter?
Well, now we as a family have agreed that we're not going to try to speak for Rachel. Her
Yeah.
writing speaks for itself, but I think that would be a legitimate question to answer. Um, I believe her dad, her words would, and can almost hear her voice say, "Dad, this shouldn't be such a big deal." I don't know why. I think she would just say, "I'm not that big of a deal. What's up with
Mm,
all this?"
wow. As her dad, because we do pass things down to our kids, this is my last question, in fact, Peter, where did her courage come from, man? Because it's one of those things, when I go back and look at her writing, I look at some of the things that she has said, and I spent a lot of time on her life the last couple of weeks. Where did the courage come from?
Yeah. That's a good question, and I'm not sure if this is it. I think a lot of that comes from Rachel's mom.
Okay.
Uh, my wife. was a fourth grade teacher for her entire career, and she was especially good about finding the kids that were being marginalized or the ones that didn't have friends, and always telling our kids to, stick up for them, to be their friend. When you get mistreated, there's something going on that probably is causing somebody to do that way. And and so my wife was somebody who always loved on kids,
Yeah.
especially, and encouraged our kids to do the same. And I think that's where, I mean, that's ingrained in our kids, I think, from a young age, is they heard and saw their mom love on people and stick up for people, especially kids that were marginalized. And I think they just learned that that's what you do.
Yeah.
And so I would have to attribute that a lot to my wife.
Her life was just so courageous
Yeah.
to me, Peter, in the sense of that she would say stuff, speak up stuff, and she did it from, it seemed like, a sincere heart of, I have to do this.
She did. She definitely had a sense of I have to kind of thing. It was even when she would have conflicts with a publisher who said, we want you to take that out of your book, or a publisher would say, we could sell a whole lot more books if you would just
You just didn't write this.
don't
Yeah.
write that. And she would tell me, it doesn't matter if I never sell another book. I have to be true to myself. Not to herself. She said, I just have to tell the truth. And she meant that. While she celebrated books that were published,
Yeah.
the numbers of while she celebrated all of that and was excited about it, I don't think she was. I don't want to say she wasn't motivated by those
Yeah.
things, but that wasn't at the core. And like I said, she wrote because she had to write. She was a writer, and when publishers said, "You'll sell more books if you do it this way," she would say, "No, there's people out
The
there
principle to
that."
it.
Yeah, well, it's that she was thinking there's people out there that need to hear someone say this, and so it wasn't. I think it was for people's sake, because she was always had somebody in mind that she wanted to uplift, or she wanted to promote, or it was always about, seemed like to me, it was always about somebody else. And that if there are kids out there that are being marginalized for whatever reason, and they need to hear somebody speak up for them, she's gonna speak up for them. And if it costs her book sales, then so be it. If that's not what the market calls for, then so be it. But in an interesting way, she started shaping the market and creating a space for those kinds of books and that kind of writing.
I was talking to a good friend of mine who was a friend of Rachel's too, and he's on the opposite end of Rachel in a lot of ways. And he said, "Man, Mina, she spoke for the people who couldn't speak for themselves."
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And I thought, man, that's her.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's her. I gotta tell you, I've enjoyed every minute of this. I could go on a lot longer. It is so beautiful out here, and just coming into her home to the deck here has been just surreal. I can't tell you how much I've looked forward to this time.
Well, thank you for coming all this way. Thank
Oh,
you.
Peter, thank you for having us. I wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man.
You're welcome.